In this episode, I visit with Anil Karmel on RegOps, revolutionizing compliance. Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox back for another episode. And today we have a repeat guest, Anil Karmel, who was with us a couple of years ago, but he's had a little bit of a change. So I asked him if he would come back, tell us what he's up to now, talk a little compliance, talk a little data, and just catch up. So, Anil, first of all, welcome and thank you so much for taking the time to visit with me today.
Absolutely, Tom. Thank you so much for having me.
Anil, could you remind our audience of your professional background?
Absolutely. Started my federal career at the Los Alamos National Laboratory, building their cloud and collaboration platforms, and ran into a challenge around compliance and ended up serving with my fellow co founder, Travis Howerton, as the CTOs of the U.S. nuclear weapons program, having to physically sign off and accept risk on compliance artifacts and saying this is really an unscalable problem. We need to find a better way, and decided to leave government and do something about that.
So, you're the only person I know who's been in nuclear regulatory compliance. So, we have to visit about that a little bit. And I really like the way you introed that. There has to be a better way to scale this. So, what were some of the challenges you guys saw? And then later you decided there's an opportunity here. Let's just develop some solutions around those. But what were the challenges you had when you were with the government in the program?
Yeah, great question, Tom. So, one of the biggest challenges that I personally faced was actually having to collect and gather the evidence to demonstrate that you're meeting these specific compliance controls. So, first, had to demonstrate how are you meeting the control and manually document that in a Word document or an Excel spreadsheet, then write the test plan of how are you going to go test those controls, then actually execute those tests and gather that evidence to then support that you have actually properly met those controls, then go sit in front of an authorizing official to validate, yes, this is what we have done, what we've said we were going to do so that the government can accept risk, and then become the risk acceptance official to have to accept risk. So realize this whole manual paper-based process of trying to demonstrate regulatory compliance is just not something that can be scaled in a manual fashion. As previously stated, we decided to do something about it and found an innovative approach to think about the problem from an adjacent discipline.
And how did you see the solution, or how did you guys really move towards helping not simply the nuclear industry, but any industry that really needs to ramp up at scale, as we say in compliance, at 40,000 feet, flying at 5,000 miles an hour, changing or working on four jet engines at once?
Exactly right. That's that you framed the problem so well. There's just so much work that needs to be done, and it feels like you can never actually get ahead of all these different regulatory requirements. So what we did is we learned from an adjacent discipline. 10 years ago, it used to be developers would write code and then they'd go hand it over to a system administrator to go test it. And then they'd say there's issues, hand it back to a developer. And the developer would fix things and then hand it back to a system administrator and then they go deploy it. And that took a long time. So this discipline called DevOps was born, or development operations, to allow developers and operators to work side by side to be able to actively share information, to be able to quickly innovate and develop software and then deploy it into environments. And then security was always done after the fact. So security was then brought in to that whole pipeline and technology, and that became DevSecOps. So what that took was this cultural transformation coupled with technology and tooling to change how software development and deployment was done. So we thought, from a challenge perspective and an opportunity, what if we took the principles of DevOps and applied it to compliance in a new discipline one might think of as regulatory operations or RegOps?
And frankly, that was one of the reasons I was excited to visit with you again, not simply to learn about your new opportunities and what you guys are up to, but I really want to try to get the word out about RegOps, the philosophy behind it, and how at this point I see it can really drive compliance maybe to a next generation. So could we start with what is RegOps?
Great question. RegOps is really a evolution of how compliance is done from being something that was traditionally a job that's done after compliance documentation has been written, after a system has been deployed, assessments having to be done, evidence having to be collected, for changing the way culturally this is done to be near real time and to be near continuous and to be near complete. So when you look at the definition of DevOps, it's moving away from manual approaches to develop software to leveraging automation and cultural transformation to make development near real time and near continuous and near complete. So applying those principles to RegOps, to this definition of RegOps, you can now make compliance artifact creation and assessment near real time, near continuous, and near complete using automation coupled with data to gather evidence in near real time using systems and allow humans to focus on what are the areas that are gaps from a compliance standpoint, what are the risks to the organization so that you can make better informed decisions.
Both the terms DevOps and RegOps have one word in common, and that's operations.
Yeah.
And I really want to focus on operations because what I heard, certainly in your description of DevOps, was the user experience. And my wife's in app development, so I hear UX all the time. And I think that with a name like Fox, I think that's a pretty cool phrase, UX. But that's not a phrase we use in compliance. We don't talk about the user experience. We talk about ye shall or ye shall not. And so I was wondering if you find that to be a fair assessment, can you talk about the importance and really the power of the operations in both DevOps and RegOps?
Absolutely. So one of the guiding principles for both DevOps and RegOps is it needs to be easier for the producer and consumer to A, produce the content and B, consume the content. So the way you do that is by leveraging automation, where you're providing a really good machine experience for machine to machine communications and a really good human experience for humans to interact with compliance artifacts in the RegOps world and be able to understand what the compliance gaps are near real time, understand what the risks are near real time, because the machine is bringing the evidence to you as opposed to you having to go out and ask for things that other people have to go collect for you manually in Word docs and Excel spreadsheets. But by providing a really good machine experience for you to be able to script answers between systems and connect them, and a really good human experience for you to log in through a graphical user interface to be able to look and visualize all that information, make sense of it, and be able to output documentation and formats that stakeholders want to see on demand in near real time in the formats they want to see them. Word, or a machine readable file, for example, NIST Open Security Controls Assessment Language or OSCAL. You're providing now a great, again, machine experience and human experience to compliance.
Could that user experience go up and down the corporate chain, or phrased another way, for a variety of audiences such as business executives at the C-suite level, board of directors for oversight, general stakeholders up to and including perhaps regulators, whoever that regulatory body might be, so that there's not simply a single source of truth, but there's a reporting that you can make that all of those different eyeballs on it will trust?
That's exactly right. And that's really what needs to happen. What ends up happening is all this work gets done to manually collect compliance artifact evidence and artifacts and build that. Then manually that information is translated into reports that C-suites and boards need to see. But it's just a point in time. It's just a snapshot. And it's only as good as the time that someone has taken to unpack all of that and then present it in a way that one hopes is meaningful and relevant to those C-suite executives, the board, or the regulators. What if you could instead say, okay, C-suite, okay, board, okay, regulator, how do you want this information presented to you? Do you want it in a Word doc? Do you want it in a dashboard? Are there specific key performance indicators that you want reported on? And then once you have an understanding, because you've built a relationship between those entities, be able to provide that information in near real time. That's the key, right? To each one of these parties in, again, those formats stakeholders want to see. So when the C-suite wants to say, okay, show me my compliance status with NIST 853, ISO 27001, PCI, SOX, whatever your regulatory requirements might be for your organization, you can present the status of your compliance program and where your gaps are in near real time and where the associated risks are and the cost to remediate, because you've gathered all that evidence in one place and you've presented it back to stakeholders in tools and technologies leveraging a good human experience and a good machine experience. That's the vision and the power of regulatory operations.
I forgot just how excited I was after I interviewed you the first time. I'm feeling that again. This is just great. You're right. This is a cultural shift, but it's a shift that literally everyone can embrace
Yeah.
because you're not targeting at one stakeholder. You're targeting at all stakeholders, indeed all external parties. So that leads us to Reg Scale. So how are you putting this out and available to the marketplace, starting
Yeah,
with co-founding of the company?
yeah, it's why Travis and I co-founded this company. Is we realized there needed to be a cultural transformation for how this is going to happen, coupled with technology and tooling to power this movement. So we said, let's leave government and go build the thing we wish we had. So we co-founded this company called RegScale to solve this problem holistically as an API-centric platform that integrates with your existing security and compliance tools to gather that evidence in near real time, leveraging the power of application programming interfaces, automatically create tickets in your ticketing systems, whatever they might be, ServiceNow, Jira, whatnot. When there are compliance gaps, automate the creation of tickets in your, or as I mentioned, the ticketing system, automate the reporting out of your platform in near real time in format stakeholders want to see, and it's always right. So we give you, again, that good human experience to log in the platform and see what your compliance state is, and a good machine experience for machines to talk to machines to keep your compliance evidence continuously up to date.
So when you talk to a new customer, potential customer, client, are you talking to C-suite executives? Are you talking to a CCO type, CISO type, CTO type, or are you up at the board of directors, or perhaps a combination of all of the above?
It's a combination of stakeholders, because every stakeholder that you mentioned is a piece of this puzzle that they need to play a part of to see the complete picture of compliance in their organization. So we primarily talk to the C-level executives, the CISOs, for example. We have talked to CCOs, heads of compliance. We have talked to CIOs. And in fact, some board members have seen, yeah, this is a new way in which board reporting could happen through a platform. So really, it's a combination of different stakeholders. We've even talked to developers that are writing code that need to demonstrate compliance and can embed RegScale in the CI/CD pipeline and output things like a software bill of materials, as an example. It all depends on what compliance challenge you're facing, but we built this as a holistic platform to solve compliance challenges at scale for enterprises of any size.
It strikes me that, almost starting with the question you had back in your government service days of how do I scale this? You've brought those questions forward, and I don't want to say this is a culmination of everything you've learned, because it also strikes me you're a continuous learner, so you may learn something new. But this is really lots of lessons you have seen over the years, and really needs for a wide variety of stakeholders you're able to deliver with that. A fair assessment.
That is a fair assessment. We're all in this journey together. We're long learners here at RegScale, which is why we listen to what the community has to say and weave that into our product and our roadmap. We've written a compliance manifesto that mirrors the Agile manifesto. So if you go to regscale.com/regops, you'll see our definition of what RegOps is and kind of a manifesto. One of the things in that manifesto is we believe compliance shouldn't be unaffordable. In fact, we believe it should be completely free to get started. So we have provided a completely free community edition, over 300,000 downloads worldwide in the last year, for folks to get started on this journey. So you don't have to, hey, where do I go? What kind of tools can I use? You can download a copy today for completely free.
So, where do you see this sort of fitting into compliance? I don't know, 2030 or mid century? Is this sort of philosophical change something you hope that will create additional dialogue and we could perhaps move to this type of reg ops approach?
Yeah, philosophically, this is really the way we need to be thinking about compliance, because if we don't change the process and how we're managing and gathering evidence and reporting compliance against a regulatory landscape that is also evolving and against a business landscape that is evolving faster than both the regulations and the demonstration of compliance to deal with it, we're already behind the eight ball. It's only going to get worse. So unless there is this transformation of how we do our jobs by leveraging the regulatory operations approach to leverage the best of the machine and the best of the human, bring both worlds together to allow the machines to do what they're good at and the humans to do what they're good at, bring both worlds together to output evidence and artifacts that are continuously up to date and they're always right, is the only way we're going to be able to modernize businesses and IT to move at the speed that the world is headed to.
What's your academic background?
So I went to the University of Illinois in Champaign, graduated with a degree in cell and structural biology of all things. So I'm a biologist by background, but I've been a tinkerer in IT since I was a little kid. So academically speaking, systems are always been near and dear to my heart, whether they're biological systems or IT systems. But technically, that is my classical training.
You're not an academically trained lawyer.
No.
No. And that is what I find so, I don't want to say refreshing, but the evolution of compliance from people like myself, where compliance programs, as you said when you started, were written by lawyers for lawyers on paper, read them, thou shalt or thou shalt not, to really becoming a business process. But you're seeing beyond simply a business process, you're seeing so whole systems integrations. And you mentioned agile, but I also heard concepts from design thinking as well, where you bring the user in, have essentially a beta testing, and then incorporate the ongoing monitoring you use during your beta testing for continuous improvement of your end using result. And so I see this continuous process. Would that also be a fair assessment?
That is 100% fair assessment. It's exactly how we built RegScale. We built RegScale by practitioners for practitioners, right? This is a platform that is been continuously evolved. When we spoke several years ago, it was really in its infancy. It's come so far with some of the largest organizations around the world all using RegScale as their ostensibly the world's first real-time GRC platform to bridge the divide between two disciplines, at least in IT, security and compliance, leveraging the power of APIs, because we use this customer-centric design philosophy of you tell us how, what feedback you have, and we continuously iterate and make the experience both for the machine and the human better to help make this process more effective and efficient.
Anil, unfortunately, we are near the end of our time for this episode. But before we leave, I wanted to ask if our listeners wanted more information on yourself, on RegScale, or really any of the topics we've touched on, what would be the best place or places for them to go?
Absolutely. I would highly encourage you to go to regscale.com. There's a litany of information. My contact information is right there on the website, as well as we have a whole RegScale University where there's free training, where you can watch YouTube videos about what this RegOps movement means. And of course, you can download a copy of RegScale right there for yourself.
Anil, I really appreciate you take the time to visit with me again, and I hope we continue this conversation on a more regular basis.
Absolutely. Likewise. We really appreciate your time and conversation in the near future.
This is Tom Fox again. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Data Driven Compliance. If you would subscribe, rate, and review this podcast, I would greatly appreciate it, as it would help in our rankings. Data Driven Compliance is the only podcast in the compliance space focusing on data and data analytics and use in the compliance profession. Data Driven Compliance is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network.